Has anyone been to the Art Center to see the exhibition yet? We are currently open right now by appointment only to view our 3 exhibitions that we have up right now. I'll make sure to drop the link in the chat later for folks to RSVP. We've got 3 great exhibitions, and one of them being our ground floor. And Allison will talk a bit about that once we start. One more minute. We're getting there, we're getting there. All right. Thank you everyone for coming today. My name is Tiara McKissick and I'm the Public Programs Coordinator at the Hyde Park Art Center. We are really, really grateful to be presenting this program, Chicago as Ground Floor, a 3-part symposium exploring how Chicago artists are working together, mentoring, learning, and using Chicago as their ground floor for research and further practice and further work as well. Today's conversation will be moderated by the Director of Exhibitions and Residencies, Allison Peters Quinn. And with that, I will hand it over to her to tell us a bit about our speakers today and about our symposium and exhibition.
Thanks so much, Sierra. Well, welcome everyone to Chicago as Teacher. This is conversation number 2, as Sierra said, in a series of 3 virtual talks we created to discuss topics related to the current exhibition, Ground Floor. Ground Floor is so named because it provides a crucial platform for emerging artists and fills an entire lower level of the Art Center. So now in its 6th iteration, the program has sampled 12 years of new art being produced in Chicago from over 120 artists. We're very excited. The program originated in 2009 from today's panelist, Dawoud Bey. He perceived a need in Chicago to support emerging artists based on nominations by respected members of the arts community. The Art Center's exhibitions committee, the artists and curators on that committee select work by recent graduates that stand out from Chicago's 5 Masters of Fine Art programs. That's Columbia College Chicago, Northwestern University, the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, the University of Chicago, and the University of Illinois at Chicago. Those are the schools that we pull from. And the exhibition brings together work by Chicago's notable emerging talent, offering a single destination to see work by new artists, but also aims to provide a stepping stone for more opportunities for these artists to continue to grow and participate in the city's art community. As Sierra said, the exhibition is up through April 3rd. Please come visit. Our talk today is titled Chicago as Teacher, and it picks up on the theme from our first talk, which happened Thursday night, Chicago as School, where several of the artists ranging from self-taught to PhD level study stated the importance of mentors in their art career. So how do artists mentor and support the careers of other artists in Chicago? What does one have to do to find an experienced advisor to help navigate art as a profession? Today, we have 3 generations of artists from Columbia College Chicago who actively share their knowledge and expertise when it comes to assisting other artists' careers. Our conversation will be about 40 minutes long. After I introduce our guests and ask a few questions, we'll open the conversation up for participation. Please put questions in the chat and Sierra will read them at that time. So I'll begin with introducing Dawoud Bey, who probably needs no introduction. Dawoud began his career as a photographer in 1975 with a series of photographs, Harlem, USA, that were later exhibited in his first one-person exhibition at the Studio Museum in Harlem in 1979. He has since had exhibitions worldwide at institutions such as the Art Institute of Chicago, the Barbican Theater Center in London, the Cleveland Museum of Art, Los Angeles County Museum of Art, and on and on and on, really. Dawoud is a longtime member of the board at the Hyde Park Art Center and chair of the exhibitions committee. And he is also a MacArthur Genius Award Fellow and professor at Columbia College Chicago since 1998. Then we have Jonathan Castillo, who came to Chicago via California and is a photographer, visual artist, and educator. His work is currently on view in the ground floor exhibition at the Hyde Park Art Center, where he also teaches advanced photography in the teen program. Jonathan's work focuses on people, place, cultural behavior, and social issues. His work has been featured in the New Yorker, Wired magazine, and just this weekend, the Chicago Tribune for the show, so we are super excited about that. Jonathan is a regular guest lecturer at institutions with photography programs. His education includes a BFA from California State University, Long Beach, and an MFA at Columbia College, Chicago. And then we have Tiara Coleman, who was a long-time participant in our team program before she began her freshman year this year at Columbia College, Chicago. So thank you all three for being here and for opening up to this personal conversation. You all three are supporting artists and being supported by artists. What do you think you offer as mentors, and what does that position mean to you? And maybe we could start with Dawoud. Dawoud, what were the qualities that you observed in John that made you decide to take him on as a mentee?
Well, let me go back to the question that you asked immediately before that in terms of what makes for a mentor. In my case, I've been working in the field for at least 45 years. I don't know exactly how long. I had my first one-person museum exhibition at the Studio Museum in Harlem in 1975. And my professional career had basically unfolded from that moment. I also, interestingly enough, started my teaching career, teaching photography classes at the Studio Museum in Harlem. And one of my first students in that class was Carrie Mae Reams. And I guess it was with Carrie Mae that I began to understand the importance and the responsibility that I had as a teacher and as someone who is teaching others who were coming into the field. I was very young at that time myself, but it gave me an immediate sense of the weight of responsibility of being a teacher and then later a mentor. So I think what I have to bring or offer in this role as mentor is the full set of experiences from my 45 years. Starting with the Studio Museum in Harlem, going to my first gallery exhibition in the late 80s, to successfully applying for regional fellowships, and then an NEA fellowship, and then on and on and on up to the MacArthur fellowship. And the thing that I think is important is to realize that everything that happens in a particular field happens inside of a community. It's not happening for an isolated individual. And my career has basically been one of continually expanding my community of support. So that's basically what I bring to it. We can get a little deeper into it as we go forward. But I think what I have to offer, because I choose to bring that to the table, I think being a mentor is definitely an act of intentional generosity. And I think it's something that I choose to do because I think I have that responsibility to the field. But I'm basically bringing my entire 4.5 decades of experience to the situation that I then selectively engage with younger artists around.
Right. I mean, I think that's quite obvious because you come with so much experience, but maybe Jonathan, you could tell us a little bit what you think you bring to the role of a mentor.
I think I bring something quite different, I think, than Dawoud. Dawoud has this amazing kind of long history of experience he can share where, I mean, I'm fairly early on in my career, I would say. I mean, I've only been kind of really seriously been pursuing photography since about 2009. You know, started community college in 2009. So, but in that short period of time, I've worked in a lot of roles in photography. I've assisted a lot of other photographers. You know, I've recently been through schools and what it's like. I'm sure what school has been like, what school is like now with student loan debt and all of these things. It's a bit different. So I kind of bring, I kind of bring the experience of kind of recently going through that process to my students who are like just about to enter into that. I think so if people are interested in going to school, for example, but if people are interested in, my students are interested in having more commercial and editorial careers, you know, that's also something that I've worked in photography. So I kind of have this jack of all trades experience working in all these different roles. And I feel like I have this experience that allows me to kind of like point my students towards the direction that works for them, you know.
And maybe just to pull Tiara in here, Tiara, what does it mean to have like a mentor for you? What does that position mean? And do you think of yourself as mentoring other artists?
Having a mentor is actually like extremely fun because you have somebody to look up to and somebody you can go to like ask advice when you need help. And it's just like those little things that really matter. And I wouldn't really say that I'm a mentor at the moment because like I have so much more to learn because I've only recently gotten into photography, maybe about 3 years ago when I started taking it extremely serious and decided to like look into Colombia to go like for photography. So I'm relatively new, so I don't have much to offer except like things I'm learning from Jonathan. But yeah.
I'm sure you have more than you know, but we'll get to that later.
Really?
Dawoud, let's go back to that question that I started with. What were some of the qualities that you observed in Jonathan that made you decide to take him on as a mentee?
Well, I think the first thing that I look for with anyone that I think I might want to have that relationship, they have to be doing really good work. That's most important. They can be the sweetest person in the world, but it's not about that. It's about making really strong work and being self-critical enough to know if, in fact, one is doing that. Because quite frankly, there's nothing I can say or do for you that's going to make up for that if you're not. And it is the work that actually takes you and moves you into those situations that you might want to be in. So the thing that I look for is really strong work. And if the person is making really strong work, I try to give them a sense that I'd like to work with them to figure out how we can get this work out into the world. Because the thing that I've said to my students over the years, and particularly my grad students, I tell them, if you can get me interested in your work, I promise you that I can get somebody else interested in the work as well. But I'm very critical. I'm very critical in relation to my own work. And I think throughout the field, there is some common agreement about what strong and rigorous work is, what constitutes strong work. Not across any particular conceptual or formal platform, but just the rigor of the making that goes into the work and the rigor of the consistent making of the work that expands that into a coherent and resonant body of work is something that I know from experience people in the field tend to agree on. So for me, it begins with the quality of the work and then being willing to be ambitious on behalf of your work. You know, to want to see your work on the walls of a gallery, to want to see your work on the walls of a museum, to want to see your work published in a book. You have to want those things. You have to be unafraid to be ambitious. And not everybody has that. There are people who make really good work who just don't feel that ambitiously about taking on the challenge of trying to get that work situated in the world in a meaningful way. So for me, John embodied those things. I was really taken by his work as I began to see it when he was in the grad program. He was working at a certain level of, a high level of technical proficiency. Like you have to really know how to make something, you know, materially and technically, how to make something well. And he clearly knew how to do that. And then he also had an interesting set of ideas to apply that to, and how to take that idea and expand it into a wide range of work that constituted an in-depth investigation of a particular subject or idea. So it begins with the work. You know, there's absolutely no point in me having that kind of conversation with someone unless the work is at the level where once you do show it to somebody who I might make an introduction to, I can pretty much assume that they're going to respond. Because like I said, we do tend to agree on what constitutes good work. Whether it's a museum curator, whether it's a gallery, there is some consensus around what constitutes a well-made thing within the field. So that's the first criteria. Everything else comes after that. There's no substitute for making good, strong work. And if you want to be in this for the long haul, to make good, strong work consistently. And so far, from what I can see, John Castillo seems to be doing that. You know, John and I do joke about some of the work that he's making. He knows I have my biases, but he's a rigorous worker. And that's the thing that attracted me to him, was the rigor of his practice.
Yeah, and what you're describing too, there must be a strong sense of trust and respect, and that you have with each other. And maybe, Jonathan, maybe you could speak a little bit more about that relationship with Dawoud as your mentor. Like what does that entail? How does that critique go? What kind of information or support has he offered that makes a difference to your work?
It's a whole lot of things. I think when I first met Dawoud, I hadn't even had a class with him yet, but I was going to be having a class with him the next semester. And I just asked if he would sit down and have a studio visit with me and look at my work. And we just sat down and talked about the work that was on the walls in my studio when I was in grad school. So, I mean, it's been everything from just having really critical dialogue about the work. And then, you know, as I was moving through grad school and then moving out of grad school, you know, it could be as simple as, hey, are you aware of this particular call for entry that's it's a triennial at the National Portrait Gallery, maybe you should apply to this kind of thing. Or, you know, so there, you know, things that I might not, and this has happened with other people too, where I didn't think that was something that I was on the level of applying to. I didn't think it was something that I could even, you know, I'm, you know, doubting myself already, you know, that I'm not really ready to apply to something like that. So I might have pushed it off for years or something. So just it's like encouragement as well as critical dialogue about the work. You know, being available to answer some questions when I run into things. So, you know, I had a gallery reach out to me after my New Yorker article came out, and they wanted to represent me and do some work with me. And so, you know, I've never worked with a gallery before, and I had lots of questions, and it, you know, like, oh my God, like I'm going to sell my work, how much, and you know, this size and at this price, and like it was just, you know, a lot to take on for and to think about if you've never done that before. So, you know, quickly messaged Dawoud, and he's like, all right, let's have a talk and sit down and talk about the, you know, how you're going to lay this out, and then send this to the gallery, to the gallerist, and see what he says. And, you know, it was like, you know, without having someone like that, it would have been really difficult, you know, and I might have even screwed it up, who knows. But, you know, but as it turned out, you know, I ended up with my work at Photo LA with this really gorgeous installation of the work, and sold my first piece. You know, it was, Dawoud wrote the essay, wrote an essay for me that went along with the work. You know, so all kinds of things that Dawoud has done that, you know, were really valuable, you know, for in different stages of, you know, from grad school to leaving grad school.
Yeah, and it's interesting because within the grad school experience, grad school basically prepares you, hopefully, in a rigorous program to make some interesting work. But after you're handed that degree and you're out on the sidewalk trying to figure out what comes next, that is generally, in most programs that I know, not talked about. And it would be pretty much impossible to navigate those kinds of situations uh, without a few words from somebody who's been there before. How does one price their work?
Yeah.
And for photo-based work, what should the edition size be? You know, he calls me up and says the gallery wants to show me. What's the responsibility of the gallery? What's the responsibility of the artist to the gallery? Who pays for what? How does this thing work? And I think without being able to have that conversation, it can be pretty disastrous, quite frankly, because the system is not really set up to benefit uh, a less than knowledgeable artist. It really isn't. It's easy to be taken advantage of. It's easy to have no idea what the protocols are, what the expectations are, what the legal implications of the relationship are. What does it mean to ship your work halfway around the world if the gallery is out of the country? And if something, if some complications come up, you're obviously not going to be able to get on a plane and go resolve it the next morning. It can be pretty complicated. And as far as I know, there's no handbook. I mean, there's a lot of information out there, but it's pretty difficult to navigate. And it was for me. You know, I came up in New York, so fortunately, I had a community of artist friends, some of whom were always 2 or 3 steps ahead of me, had just gotten into a group show at MoMA, or had just, you know, achieved some professional recognition of some kind, whether fellowship, exhibition, opportunity. So within that community of artist friends that I came up in, we kind of pulled each other forward in that way. As one person was able to move forward, that information was passed on to the rest of us. And we kind of moved along together that way. You know, it wasn't a conventional mentor relationship. We were just kind of looking out for each other, because otherwise there would be, quite frankly, no way to know how this field functions. It can be quite mysterious and intimidating.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're describing too is that mentors do not have to be a certain age. They can be your peer set. They can be groups of people who have different experiences or more knowledge than you do. And maybe Dawoud, coming out of the Studio Museum, which was a great cohort of artists at that time and still, do you think it's important, or how do you think it works with artists of color that have to really support themselves because other institutions weren't doing it at that time? Do you feel like that it's a really important thing to find mentors that have a similarity or that know your experience, know experiences like you to help you through it?
Well, I think it's interesting because I've been in Chicago now for, well, since 1998. And Chicago happens to have a very sophisticated infrastructure of support for the art in terms of the numbers and the kinds of museums here. There's a very strong level of support from those institutions, all of which are probably in relation to someone making very good work, probably more accessible than most people would think. All institutions depend on an influx of new work. They need new, exciting, and resonant work from new artists. So they're always looking for that work. And I think Chicago, it's probably even more so than a place like I come from, New York, which can be absolutely overwhelmingly competitive. I think one can find an easier time of building a career here in Chicago because the infrastructure here in Chicago tends to really support its community of artists. And that's everything from institutions like Hyde Park Art Center on up to the Art Institute of Chicago. And I think that's something that people may or may not be aware of. They may feel shut out of, when in fact those institutions, all of them, MCA, Chicago, they're all always looking for and interested in new work. They depend on our work for their existence. And I think most artists tend to give all the power to the institutions without realizing without the work, the institutions are just empty architecture. And I think there's also a very strong community of support here in terms of Chicago's community of collectors. And I think those collectors working in conjunction with the institutions are very supportive of emerging artists here in Chicago. The question is, you know, how does one become a part of, how does one begin to become a part of that community? Because it's really a community. You know, when I talk about, you know, the infrastructure of support, it's really a community of support. And, you know, it's the thing that one has to figure out how to become a part of. And it was the thing that sustained me when I moved here back in 1998.
Well, and we're talking about people who do have mentors, but you know, how does one go about finding a mentor? You know, if you do a quick search, it says, "Don't ask someone to be your mentor. It can't happen that way." Tiara, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what you look for in a good mentor, and how did that situation happen for you? How did you find Jonathan as a mentor?
So when I was taking classes at the Hyde Park Art Center, he started teaching there, and I was just like, oh my gosh, wow, he's really cool. His work is amazing. And we kind of just like connected because I feel like there has to be like a bond between a mentor and a mentee, or if you don't have a bond, it's not really going to work. Like, you have to be open-minded too, because that's really the only way that you can really excel. Like, if you really listen to your mentor and if you listen to like the mentee, then you will definitely like excel. But yeah, I was looking into going into Columbia, which I did, and he was like, oh well, I go to Columbia too, I can like help you, and like I have my studio and stuff. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's cool. So we he became my mentor, and it's very amazing. And like I'm really blessed to have like, I wouldn't say a backup, but just like a really cool person that can help me advance into my career, since I'm like just starting out like professionally. And also, definitely don't search up looking for a mentor. It's something that just like happens. Like, you have to find somebody that like has connections or something like that, and then you just kind of, I don't know, vibe with anybody that likes your work and like actually gives you good criticism and wants to see you excel and exceed. So yeah.
Yeah, and Tiara, one of the things that I strongly advise you do is to take advantage of the Museum of Contemporary Photography as a professional resource. It is a very important part of the ecology of support here in Chicago. Both the staff at the museum and the fact that there are thousands of photographs that one can access and look at in person rather than on screen in a dark room somewhere in slide presentation format. I actually chose to come to Columbia because of the Museum of Contemporary Photography. I had done a residency project at the Museum of Contemporary Photography back in 1993, which was my first contact with Columbia College. And the fact that it was a college that had a strong photography department and a world-class photography museum, you know, that was the kind of place I wanted to be. Certainly students at Columbia who have been able to get a part-time position working at MOCP end up with a whole different sense of how a museum works and functions than those who don't. It completely demystifies the museum work. And if I'm not mistaken, John did work at MOCP while he was at Columbia. Did you spend time at MOCP, John?
Yeah, I worked at the MOCP the whole time I was in grad school, and Tiara and I were just talking before we got on here about, I was urging her to reach out and see if there were any positions open at the MOCP, and I could give her an introduction to the people that I knew there, because they're often looking for undergrads. And as Dawoud says, it's a great place to work. It demystifies a lot of things about how the museum world works. You're going to be constantly introduced to amazing photographers and curators and all kinds of important people in Chicago that are connected to what you want to do. They'll be coming through, and you'll be working with them and assisting them. And the MOCP is always looking for undergrads, especially undergrads that are in their first or second year at Columbia, because they want undergrads that are going to be there for not just a year. They want to spend 2, 3, or 4 years having them work there, because you teach these students all these valuable skills to work at the museum, and then if they're gone after a year, it's kind of like wasted resources and time, because then you got to retrain someone else. So you're actually better off getting a position there in your first or second year when you're in undergrad. So, you know, there's things like that. And I was going to say that when we were talking about looking, what do you look for in a mentee? Like, so I think primarily what I look for is just students who are they're really interested and they're committed to what they're doing. So even if there were, and there's some promise of interesting work, whether it's, you know, a little bit of interest in some technical capabilities, or maybe just exploring some interesting ideas. But it's a little hard to tell sometimes in a beginning photo class or a high school photo class what someone's going to do. If you looked at my work from 10 years ago, you know, it doesn't look anything like what I make now. So I just look for people that they show up, they're interested, they're engaged, you know, and, you know, they're not wasting their time or my time.
Jonathan, do you think that mentorship is reciprocal? Like you get something out of doing it for someone else? Being a mentor?
I've had a string of really great mentors, starting back in my community college with my professor, John Gray, who started here in Chicago, moved out to LA. And, you know, then he introduced me to a bunch of his former students who I used to work and assist for them. And there's just been kind of a string of people that have given me opportunities, introduced me to people, pointed me in the right direction, given me good advice that, like, I know I couldn't be here without any of those people helping me. Like if I was just teaching myself photography online and, you know, trying to figure out how to have a career, it's not something that I think I would have been able to do on my own. So to me, it feels like a responsibility. Like I have to do the same thing for other people as much, and I enjoy it. So I think I get a sense of satisfaction, like I'm part of something bigger, that's like a lineage of artists and photographers and, you know, just people in a community helping one another. Yeah.
Dawoud, what about you? Do you think mentorship is reciprocal? Do you think you get something out of being a mentor?
Well, I think being a mentor is related to what I consider to be my responsibility to the field, to take some responsibility for trying to keep the field revitalized by bringing new artists and photographers into it, who I think are making substantial work. I think there's that, because none of us get to where we are by ourselves. Some people may forget how they got to where they are, but the truth of the matter is no one gets to wherever there is for you. No one ever gets there on their own. And that's something I've been aware of for a very long time. So I think for me, it's really, it's about being able to give something back in light of how your own circumstances have been enhanced, and how you can, if you're able to identify young artists that you think take what they do seriously, how you can pass that on. And ideally, as with John, they embrace that fully, not only in terms of their work, but then in terms of, you know, mentoring younger artists like Tiara. So to me, it's really about a commitment to the larger field, and by extension, a commitment to history.
Thank you. I know we're getting close to the 3:40 mark, but I want to just ask one more question, because I do want to give some context in that this whole conversation and Ground Floor in general came to be because of this history of, or at least this current moment. But I would say going back several decades of artists supporting other artists in Chicago. I can name a handful. When I came to Chicago in the early 2000s, finding other artists just through talking to artists like Dawoud and like Ann Wilson and Inigo Manglano Ovalle. There's this tier of established artists or artists that had kind of gotten there, using Dawoud's terms, in museums and collections that were quick to recommend artists that were in programs or younger artists that were struggling to get by. So it was really important that to Dawoud that we start this program to help artists coming out of programs immediately, coming out of MFAs, to give them a platform to show their work, and then to create a connection with them so that they look at Hyde Park Art Center as a space to continue to further their career and other opportunities and play a part of that network. But I think one of the big words that we haven't really mentioned and we touched upon a little bit is advocacy, that you become an advocate for these artists. And Dawoud and Jonathan, maybe you could expose a little bit how that works. Like, there's this whole chain of command that people ask for suggestions, me being a curator asking for ideas.
Always.
Dawoud?
Curators are always asking me, have you seen anything interesting? And I know what that means. Have you seen any interesting work by an artist that we might be missing? Because there's no curator who can make enough studio visits to kind of capture everything. And so the field really depends on its community for those kinds of recommendations. The curator, it's just part of an ongoing conversation because everybody in the field knows that I teach. They know that I've been at Columbia for a very long time. They know that I, as an extension, have the opportunity to see a lot of new work being made by younger artists. And they know that I'm the kind of person who has no problem bringing those younger artists' names into a conversation. If the work justifies it, I have no problem. And I really think you might want to take a look at so-and-so. And then we figure out how to make that happen. I'll either go back to the artist and tell them, get in touch with so-and-so, we've already talked about it, or to somehow facilitate that relationship. You can call that advocacy, because I do advocate for young artists who I think are making strong work. And I try to remain their advocate until the thing has enough traction that it begins to sustain itself. And then I start that process over again. But I think it's, it's a form of advocacy, a form of advocating for good young artists to others in the field. It kind of depends on my doing that.
I would say that where I'm kind of at in my career, I don't have much as the kind of sway where I can advocate to a curator that you should look at so-and-so's work, that I could kind of help put that work in front of the right people. What I can do and do often as much as I can is either people that were in my cohort, and friends and colleagues that are applying to things. I often will share my application materials and show people if I won a certain fellowship or grant or something, I'd be like, this is how I structured it. This is what I did, and this is how I got that, got that exhibition or got that award, and, show them that this is the structure of that application. So I've had people tell me that that's been really helpful. So, I mean, that would be, I wouldn't say it's advocacy, but it's like a way that I've kind of helped others. Thinking about Chicago though, versus other places, like I'm originally from Los Angeles, and when I came out of undergrad, you know, I used to visit all the galleries down at Bergamot Station and the galleries over in, like, I think it's Culver City. And you'd go to these openings and shows, and the whole, you see all this great work on the walls, and you see people, you don't know who is who, you have no idea who anyone is. Everything seems really opaque. There's just no, there's kind of no, you can go see it all, but you're on the outside looking in, and there never seems like there's a clear or clear way to enter into that conversation or join the community. You know, as soon as I came to Chicago, it was totally different. You know, there's the lecture in photography series at Columbia College, Chicago, and you'd go to that, and there'd be Catherine Edelman, you know, hanging out in the crowd asking questions, and you'd strike up a conversation with her. Mm-hmm. And I'd met her before because Dawoud took all of the grad students to her gallery to have a conversation with her. And then, oh, there's, you know, McCall from the curator from over at the Art Institute, and then I see her at the gala at the MOCP because I'm working there at the MOCP. And you just start meeting all these people in a much more organic and kind of accessible way, because through working at the MOCP or through knowing Dawoud, or through, you know, through your class and all those, or just showing up to these lectures, you start meeting people, and you meet them more than once. So it's not just meeting someone one time and, you know, and then they, you know, there's no chance for them to remember your face or your name. And that's before you even have any kind of conversation about your work. It's just being at events and in places where all the gatekeepers are. You know?
It's about being a part of the community.
Yeah, and
being a part of the community that you want to be a part of. Not because you're there to hustle anybody or you're there to make something happen right away, although it certainly isn't going to happen if you're not a part of that community. But once you understand that, it is the very organic kind of thing that John just described. You know, showing up for the opening. Support the institutions that you want to support you. You want them to support you, show up to their opening. Show that you care. You'd like to show at that gallery? Well, it might be a good idea to show up at their opening, to show that you care about their program. Stop by the desk and say, this is really interesting. I'm glad I came. Can you put me on the mailing list? You know, just show up and give support to the institutions that you would hope would support you. Because generally, at those kinds of events, the whole infrastructure of support is usually gathered in one room. From the collecting community, the curatorial community, the institutional community, and they're all there to give support to whatever work is being shown. And it's the best situation under which to meet someone, because you're meeting them as part of the community. The other thing that I tend to tell artists in this mentoring relationship is to how do we figure out a strategy for making these things happen? Because one of my friends, who was kind of an informal mentor, he described it to me years ago. He said, you know, Dawoud, this is a chess game. I'm like, really? And then he asked me, do you play poker? I said, no, I don't play poker. He said, you need to play poker and you need to know how to play chess. I'm like, what's he talking about? But this idea that one move follows another and you just can't make a move without making a certain move before that. So that's one of the things that I talk to John about and other young artists that I mentor. And that if you want to get to there, what's the next thing you need to do on the way to that? Because you can't just jump 3 steps ahead. There's other things that need to happen so that you're viable by the time you get to that situation. So it's also figuring out the strategy for building a career, so that things begin to fall into their proper place at the time that you need them to happen.
Yeah, I think that the idea of it being a little bit like a chess game is interesting. I think there's someone mentioned something to me like, oh, John, you're really lucky sometimes. And I was having another conversation with another friend, and it was like, well, it's not some luck. Often is just being like prepared so that when an opportunity arises, you see it as an opportunity to start a conversation about something, you know. So like knowing who people are, you know, being in those places, showing up at those openings, you know, just being part of that scene, that community. But what I really like about Chicago, though, is that it's like Dawoud was talking about New York being really competitive. I've never been part of that, but if it's anything like LA, you know, which I would assume LA is probably a little closer to what it's like in New York. You know, it's not easy to access. Even if you just show up all the time, it's not as easy to kind of just strike up conversations with random people at these places. But here in Chicago, I mean, I've never felt like anyone, when I go to any event or opening, I couldn't have a conversation with anyone about the work on the walls and just have a cool conversation about what's there in front of us at the moment, you know, and then things kind of do happen, you know, which is just a really wonderful thing. It's just I felt way more welcome here when I showed up than I felt in the place I'd lived my whole life, you know. So at least in the arts community. So.
And I think it's very true. When I came to Chicago back in 1998, there were people who returned my phone call. And I couldn't believe it, because the equivalent person in New York would just play phone tag indefinitely. You know, so I immediately, coming from New York, Chicago felt like a small town in a big city. And by a small town, I mean everybody knows each other. Everybody is somewhat accountable to each other or connected to each other in a way that they are not in quite the same way in like LA or New York. You know, Chicago is a very hospitable city, and it tends to want to support its own. When you show up here, they want to support you. And if your work substantiates that.
We've got probably one more question, and there's a question in the chat from Hinda. It says, I'm writing about Latina artists who are connected to Pilsen. Some are connected to Chicago's more established museums and get commissions or significant grants or sell their work to collectors. Many more seem to be connected to networks for gigs as teaching artists that don't pay much and small galleries. Any other thoughts on how to help some of the excellent artists in the latter category to move over to the former?
Well, the interesting thing is there are multiple art here. And we've kind of been talking about this almost in a singular sense, you know, but there are multiple artworks, and each one operates by a different set of standards, a different set of protocols. And I think if one wants to move from one community to another, the exhibiting community or the collecting community, the work is the thing that will take you there. For me, it always goes back to the work. You know, so again, everything that you just said, you know, if that's where you want to be, you start showing up over there. You know, if you want to make that transition from this community, you know, then you start showing up more where the community that you want to be a part of congregates, and you become a part of that community. But in terms of the museum and collecting thing, that's based entirely on the work. There's a particular criteria that is attached to the making of art objects in those communities. And not that there's any orthodoxy, because there isn't. You know, the range of conceptual work and other kinds of made object-based work is vast, but each of them is attached to a particular history. And I think whatever area one is working in, it kind of behooves you to know the history of the area in which you're working as deeply as possible, so you can situate your work inside of that conversation.
Yeah, I agree with Dawoud, and that we have a body of teaching artists as well that talk to us about exhibiting, and there's a fairly fluid transition. As you can see, Jonathan is a teaching artist and has moved into exhibiting artists and is moved into center program artists too. So there's a way to be fluid about it within institutions, but also just being there and knowing what's available and asking about it, I think is a good way to go about it. Any other tips, Jonathan?
Just do lots of photo booths for everyone. One of my side hustles how I make a living was doing photo booths. So I was making a joke because I did one at one of the galas at Hyde Park a little while ago. It was fun to hang out and meet everyone that way too.
Yeah, people really went crazy for the photo booth. It was the funniest thing ever. They were like, "Oh my gosh, this is so amazing." I was like, "Yeah, enjoy it."
We had all the teens from my class help set it up, so it was both like teaching the kids how to set up everything, and then everyone got to enjoy it for the gala. So like I always look for lots of kind of win-win things like that, where like I can do something to help someone or help an institution, but also like teach someone something, or bring someone on as a way to assist. So I'm always looking for ways where I can kind of do multiple things at once like that. It's silly, it's small, but like things like that are fun.
Yeah, I don't know how much time we have left, but I just want to reiterate for Tiara as an undergrad photography engaged person at Columbia College. John and I have already said it, but I'll say again that probably the single most important thing that you can do is to put yourself at the Museum of Contemporary Photography. That's probably the single most helpful thing you can do, and to use the resources and the relationships that can come out of being in that environment. I think, both professionally, and I think what it has the capacity to do for your own work as you are continually engaging with photographs across the whole history of the medium. It kind of gives you a benchmark to look at in relation to your own work as well. So that's probably for right now, and especially as things continue to normalize and open up, I would imagine that's probably the most helpful thing that you can do, being at Columbia and being interested in photography, is to completely utilize the Museum of Contemporary Photography as a result. Even more so than hanging around the department a whole lot. Hang around the museum.
Hang around the grad students too. As an undergrad, try to hang around and make as many friends as you can with the grad students who are doing what if that's something you might want to be doing, is going on to grad school afterwards. Maybe you don't know right at this moment, but one of the great ways to find out would be to spend a little time with the photo grads, the ones who are doing it right now. Whether that's even at Columbia, which you probably have the most access to, but even at other schools across, Chicago, if you end up meeting anyone that's doing a grad program at SAIC, for example.
Well, we're at 4:02, so I think we should wrap it up on that note. Thanks, Dawoud, Tiara, Jonathan, for sharing your insights. I know the center program continues on another Zoom link at 4. And then the last talk of the symposium is on Thursday, I believe, and it's Chicago as Research. So if you're interested in that, please join in on this same Zoom link. And then we have a couple other programs for ground floor artists. We're screening all of the videos and having a discussion. And then we're also having a group discussion on kind of exploring the city and a bunch of the artists that have done that and created archives. So with that note, thank you everyone for joining us, and we hope to see you again. Bye-bye.
Okay, take care.
Thanks for coming, everyone.
Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Bye.